Well, good morning, church. I hope that you're doing well. Happy Lord's Day to each one of you. Hope that you and your families are staying healthy uh, as we continue to trudge through this season of contamination and virus and pandemic. One of the things that I think has made this time so difficult is the lack of community. Um, that this isn't something that the community is able to come together and face. It's not like 9/11. It's not like Pearl Harbor where there's this greater sense of community as we go through things together. But rather, this event has been isolating. It's left us in our homes alone. Um, it's left kids out of school, even though they're returning to school this week. There's a lot of people still quarantining across the world and across the states, I guess. Um, and so through this season, we've faced a lack of community as much as we've faced the problem itself. And what I want to talk about this morning, and I'll try to do it briefly. I never succeed in doing that. Pretty much always go for 20 minutes when I'm shooting for 10 minutes. But I think I can get this one. Think I can get this one down. Um, so the trouble that we've been facing, I think, or one of the struggles with facing this virus is that there's not really a community that we can face it with, at least not in a physical sense. In a spiritual sense, in a mental, emotional sense, we're kind of, we know we're all going through this together, but as far as when it comes to seeing your brother or your sister, or even family members, there's not a whole lot of that happening today. And I think this is my assumption here. But as I conclude the study on Revelation today, and we begin a new study next week, this is what I've sort of come away thinking about. And if you've read Revelation 22, which is the chapter for today, and sort of what I've been providing thoughts for during the midweek, you'll know that it's the tree of life and the river of life that proceeds from the throne of God. There's final warnings and exhortations that Jesus gives to his church, to sort of keep on keeping on even when it's hard, to continue being faithful. All of that is in this final chapter, and it's sort of a direct address from John to his church. And it's all pretty straightforward, I think. There's not a whole lot of images. I mentioned in the post on Wednesday that the tree of life and the water of life, that those are representations of this qualitative state that we will experience by being with God, that there won't be sickness, there won't be death, there won't be disease or cancer, there won't be depression, there won't be all these things, but that life will be so abundant that we can drink from it and that we can eat of it. If you need life, I guess you can go up to a tree and pick it off. That's how abundant it will be, and it'll all be from God. So that's there. But there's a deeper aspect to who God is, who God is who's giving this vision to John, and I think what he wants, as it's led me in my reading this week and in some of the research that I've done. And it's that God is a God of community. In America, we are very we're hyper focused, I guess, on individual liberties, and I think generally I've benefited from that. You've benefited from that, and it's a good thing that we individually all have our freedoms to act however we would like to an extent. That's good. However, there's also been a gospel that's preached individual salvation, that this relationship, it's just between me and Jesus. And nobody else can intrude upon that. It's just me and Jesus going through this life together and nobody else. And that, I think that's false. Why do I think that's false? In Genesis, when we started last year, and we've kind of gone through the biblical story, I think, and we're concluding it this summer. We start in Genesis. And we don't really focus on this too much, but there's the command to all of God, from God to all of his creation, go forth and multiply and increase, go forth and increase, and spread out over the earth. That even happens in the Tower of Babel story. God is creating communities. He is in the interest of multiplying. And when he talks to Abraham, he doesn't say, you know what, Abraham, this thing that we got going, it's just me and you. No, his promise to Abraham is, out of you, I'm going to make a nation. And then from this nation, he says, you know what, out of you, Israel, all of the nations are going to come to me through you. And then in Jesus, God creates a church. He doesn't create just individual people who experience life with him. He creates a community. And then in Revelation, God creates a new city, the New Jerusalem, where the nations come for healing and where God's people live and dwell with God. God is a God of community. And that's part of what we get to enjoy, and I think that's why this time has been so difficult, is that we've been lacking this great community that for us we've never really had to do without. If you're an introvert like me, then you might have done better than somebody who's more extroverted and sort of recharges their batteries on being around other people. But even introverts can only tolerate so much of solitude. They eventually have to come out of the mountains and go to the camp. Sorry, that's the garbage truck that's dumping the garbage right now. So God is a God of community. What does that mean for us? It means that we know God when we are engaged in community. So for instance, one of the things that a lot of ministers are really worrying about is after this COVID thing happens, what is our church attendance going to look like? People have gotten out of the habit. They're no longer attending church because of a habit that they've had. They've now, if anything, created a habit of not attending church on Sundays. So what is church attendance going to look like? And in that sense, it's easy to try and go it alone as a Christian. And there are times where it feels like we're alone, but at the end of all things, we're not going to exist alone in our little cubicle in heaven. Rather, we are going to exist as a community of holiness. We're going to exist as a community of love and empathy and understanding. And in heaven, when we talk about the trials of our life, pride won't get in the way. We'll be able to share the stuff that we struggled with without shame. And we'll talk about how we've been redeemed and sanctified by Jesus. But how does that challenge us today then? I think there's a challenge there in that God has saved us to be a part of his church. He hasn't saved us to be on our own, and that means we have to engage with others. That loving our neighbor means we have to get out in our community. That we have to bring people into our own church, to our congregation and community, and show them what God's kingdom looks like by the way we treat one another, which I believe our church does a fantastic job. I've never heard anything but compliments from a visitor who comes in and says, "Wow, everybody was so kind here." So I think we're doing a great job, and I know God has blessed us in that. There's a lot of people gifted with kindness and with a warm personalities in our church that are very welcoming. But I think God has also sent us out to bring people into the flock, to bring people into the church. And that means even when it's difficult, or when there's people we don't like, or people who grate on our nerves, or our personalities don't get well together, where we have to follow the lead of Christ, that through Jesus, through his love, which led him to his death, we are called to also go out into the world and bring people to know the love of Christ through his church, which is how we've come to know it. More than likely, you did not come to know Jesus in a vacuum. You came to know Jesus because there were Christians who taught you how to love Jesus. And if they, even if you say, you know what, I sat down and read my Bible there, and I came to know Jesus in that way, there was no Christians involved, and I obeyed the gospel. There is a long history of Christians who have made it so that that Bible was available to you. So we don't exist outside of community, and God has not created us to be individuals only. He's created us to exist as his church in a community, which we are called to continually be. And I know it's so hard. I know it's so difficult to continue to engage in this community today since we're so isolated. And I think the isolation in many ways is us loving our neighbor and making sure we don't get others sick. We have to. So there's balance there, but as we look to returning to the building, which there's not a date for that, but we're still sort of seeing how things shake out and what the future holds. But as we look to returning, I want to encourage you that in our church you are loved. In the church of God you are welcome. In the church of Jesus Christ, you are welcome to receive the blood and the body of Christ with all of your brothers and sisters. In whatever ways we can pray for you, we really want to do that. Please reach out to me if you have any concerns. And if you're part of the Facebook page, please continue to keep the Suggs family in your prayers and monitor that page as it's updated, because there are a lot of prayer requests that go out that we need to be going to God with. So anyways, I just wanted to leave you with that God is a God who, in his great story and in his great plan, from the very beginning, he has been interested in groups of people, in communities. And that finally, at the end of all things, when Jesus returns, and when all the wrong things are going to be made right, and the years of bad health that have hurt us, our bad backs, the sicknesses that we deal with, the struggles to breathe sometimes, those are going to go away. And God is going to restore that which is broken in us and around us. And there he's going to restore right relationships between us and him, and us and everyone else as well. We will be known, and we will be loved. I think it's important that we continue to hold on to that as our society sort of polarizes and in some sense individualizes more than it is. That we are called to be the people of God in a lost and dark world, and you are that light. You are his precious creation, and you are welcome into his kingdom. God bless you.